celebrate Perseverance landing on Mars today, 18th February 2021. And for this occasion, I wanted to look back to the speech that was given by John F. Kennedy when he decided to invest a lot of money for men to walk on the moon. And today we are talking about sending robots into Mars. The speech made by John F. Kennedy was done in a difficult context where Soviet Union have launched the first man into space. Khrushchev used this triumph as prime evidence of communism's superiority over capitalism. The US, led by John F. Kennedy, feared that it was failing maybe behind the Soviet Union and losing this space race. Hence, John F. Kennedy consulted politicians and NASA officials and decided it was time for America to go where no man had gone before by putting a man on the moon itself. This success would not only catapult the nation over the Soviet Union but also allow man to more fully explore the mysteries of space. This mission would be accomplished by the end of the 1960s, and it was indeed a success. Let us now hear the full speech. President Pfizer, Mr. Vice President Governor, Congressman Thomas, Senator Wiley, and Congressman Miller, Mr. Webb, Mr. Bell, scientists, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your president having made me honorary visiting professor, and I will assure you that my first lecture will be very brief. I'm delighted to be here, and am particularly delighted to be here on this occasion. We meet at a college noted for knowledge, in a city noted for progress, in a state noted for strength, and we stand in need of all three, for we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. Despite the striking fact that most of the scientists that would have ever known, ever alive, working today, despite the fact that this nation's own scientific manpower is doubling every 12 years in a rate of growth more than 3 times that of our population as a whole, despite that, the vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension. No man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come, but condense, if you will, colonization and nuclear power. And now, if America's new spacecraft succeeds in reaching Venus, we will have literally reached the stars before midnight tonight. This is a breathtaking pace, and such a pace cannot help but create new ills as it dispels old, new ignorance, new problems, new dangers. Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardship as well as high reward. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer to rest, to wait. But this city of Houston, this state of Texas, this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This country was conquered by those who moved forward, and so will space. William Bradford, speaking in 1630 of the founding of the Plymouth Bay Colony, said that all great and honorable actions are accomplished with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with unswervable courage. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man, in his quest for knowledge and progress, is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead whether we join in or not, and it is one of the great adventures of all time, and no nation will exert to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race of space. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond, and we have vowed that we shall not see it governed by a hostile flag of conquest, but by a banner of freedom and peace. We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destructions, but with instruments of knowledge and understanding. Yet the vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if in this nation first, and therefore we intend to be first. In short, our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligation to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men, and to become the world's leading space faring misuse of space any more than we go unprotected against the hostile use of land or sea. But I do say that space can be explored and mastered without feeding the vice of war, without repeating the mistakes that man has made it, extending his reach around this globe of ours. There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in our space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation many never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win, and the others too. It is for these reasons that I regard this decision last year to shift our effort in space from low to high gear as among the most important decisions that will be made during my incumbency in the office of the presidency. In the last 24 hours, we have seen facilities now being created for the greatest and most complex exploration in man's history. We have felt the ground shake and the air shattered by the testing of the Saturn C1 booster rocket, many times as powerful as the Atlas, which launched John Glenn, generating power equivalent to 10,000 automobile with the accelerator on the floor. We have seen the site where we have F1 rocket engines, each one as powerful as 8 engines of the Saturn combined, will be clustered together to make the advanced Saturn missile assembled in a new building to be built at Cape Canaveral, as tall as 48-story structure, as wide as a city block, and as long as 2 length of this field. Within these last 19 months, at least 45 satellites have cycled the Earth. Some 40 of them were made in the United States of America, and they were far more sophisticated and supplied far more knowledge to the people of the world than those of the Soviet Union. The Mariner spacecraft, now on its way to Venus, is the most intricate instrument in the history of space science. The accuracy of that shot is comparable to firing a missile from Cape Canaveral and dropping it in the stadium between the 40 yards line. Transit satellites are helping our ships at sea to steer on safer course. Tyros satellites have given us unprecedented warnings of hurricanes and storms, and will do the same for forests, fires, and icebergs. We have had our failures, but so have others, even if they do not admit them, and they may be less public. To be sure, we are behind and will be behind for some time in manned flight, but we do not intend to stay behind, and in this decade we shall make up and move ahead. The growth of our science and education will be nourished by new knowledge of our universe and environment, by new techniques University of Houston, with its manned spacecraft center, will become the heart of a large scientific and engineer community. During the next 5 years, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration expects to double the number of scientists and engineers in this area, to increase its outlays for salaries and expenses to 60 million a year, to invest some 200 million in plant and laboratory facilities, and to direct our contracts for new space efforts over 1 billion from this center in this city. To be sure, all this costs us all a good deal of money. This year's space budget is 3 times what it was in January 1961, and it is greater than the space budget of the previous 8 years combined. That budget now stands at 5,400 million a year, and staggering sum to somewhat less than we pay for cigarettes and cigars every year. Space expenditures will soon rise some more from 40 cents per person per week to more than 50 cents a week for every man, woman and child in the United States. For we have given this program a high national priority, even though I realize that this is in some measure an act of faith and vision, for we do not know what benefits await us. But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 400,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made in new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speed over 2,500 miles per hour, causing a heat about half that of the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today. And do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold. I'm the one who is doing all the work, so we just want you to stay cool for a minute. However, I think we're going to do it, and I think that we must pay what needs to be paid. I don't think we ought to waste any money, but I think we ought to do the job, and this will be done in the decade of the 60s. It may be done while some of you are still here at school in this college or university. It will be done during the terms of office of some of the people who sit here on this platform, but it will be done, and it will be done before the end of this decade. And I'm delighted that this university is playing a part in putting a man on the moon as part of the great national effort of the United States of America. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it, and the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure